is the one story that stands by itself in every soul. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome all of you in this wonderful session of the book discussion. When Mommies was a little girl, this is the book we all are going to discuss for another 40 minutes here. So let me take this privilege to first of all introduce the chair for the session, Mamta Nancy. She is a prolific children's writer by a fairly obvious choice. Based in Delhi, her writings have explored the various shades of the world of children. She has authored, edited, and translated many books for children, including A Brush with Indian Art, which won the Hindu Young World Good Books Award in 2019 in the Best Book Non-Fiction category. Milky Way, one of the popular books of her, she has also been associated with the advertisement world for many years. A big round of applause for the chair of the session, Mamta Nancy. The another panelist, and he is a wonderful author who has contributed in this book, which has been edited by Mr. Pranav Kumar Singh, Richa Jha. Richa Jha writes fiction for children and social observation for adults. She is the founder and publisher of Pickle York Books, an independent children's publishing house nominated for the prestigious Bolgana Prize for Children's Publisher of the Year 2022 in Italy, and a three-time finalist as the Best Publisher at the Publishing Next Industry Award, India. Books written and published by her have won national and international recognition across the platform like the South Asia Book Award, USA, the White Raven, Germany, and the Amazing Bookshelf, Italy, the Golden Pinwheel, China, and so many. Please have a big round of applause for Richa Jha. The another panelist with us today in this wonderful session is Ratna Manucha. Ratna Manucha wears many hats. Academician, writer, storyteller. She founded Little Flower School in Dehradun in 1996, which soon became one of the premier junior schools of the city. In 2022, after a glorious spell of 26 years, she decided to call it a day and close the school, as in her own words, "It was my baby and there was no way I could see it being managed by anyone else." She has worked as an announcer with All India Radio in Manipur, Assam, and Nagaland. Ratna Manucha has been one of the jury for the WOW Litfest Dehradun in the Young Adult section for the year 2020 and 2021. She has been invited to moderate the sessions at the Dehradun Literature Festival and the WOW Litfest Dehradun every year. Ladies and gentlemen, have a big round of applause for Ms. Manucha. Now, I would like to request the chair of the session, Ms. Mamta Nancy, to begin this discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for this session, and thanks to you both for being here. And just to give you a brief introduction about this book is called When Mommy Was a Little Girl. It has been published by Ponytail Books, and it has been edited by Pranav K. Singh. And it's an anthology of short stories. It is basically a tribute to the Russian classic When Daddy Was a Little Boy by Alexander Raskin. And as the title suggests, it's a collection of short stories written by women authors who have either written about themselves when they were little girls, about their childhood experiences, or about their mother's childhood experiences when their mothers were little girls. And I think what is interesting about this book is that it kind of opens up a whole new world. When I read all the stories in the book, that's what I realized, that it basically de-essentializes the idea of the very mythical sort of notion that we have about mothers, you know. It kind of encourages young readers to look at their mothers as not just like caregivers, but feisty young individuals through the prism of their childhood experiences. So I think that's what the gist of this book for me is. And I would like to begin the conversation by asking you both to maybe talk a little about the stories that you have in the book, and what are the stories behind the stories that you have in the book? Are they inspired by personal experiences? Who would like to go first? Maybe Ratna can go first.
Well, in my case, my story is when mommy got a pet, how mommy got a pet. And it's a mix of maybe a little bit of my story as a little girl, snippets from my life, and also from my twin granddaughters' lives, both seamlessly blended together to create this story. Growing up in Dehradun, so my story revolves around Dehradun, and Dehradun for a long time was known as a little town of grey hair and green hedges. Not anymore. And those hedges were basically of lantana bushes, with flame-colored yellow, orange, beautiful flowers, beautiful blossoms. There's another story around those blossoms, which we can talk about later if there's time. And also the verandas. Dehradun had sprawling houses with verandas on all sides. So my story has that, people talking across the hedges because boundary walls came up much later. And then a little bit of jealousy, and which is shown a little bit of not jealousy, maybe loneliness. I grew up as an only child. My mother was widowed very early on in life, and I was an only child. So definitely when we played hopscotch and we played hide and seek in these houses, and the verandas were very much a part of our lives, the children at some point of time would go back to their siblings or their pets, and I used to be left alone. So that little thing also wove its way into the story. And then coming to my granddaughters, which is very interesting. My twin granddaughters, for the longest time, lived across the house from us. And when they used to go back from school, outside their bedroom window, there was this little oriental magpie robin, which would be hopping and twittering around outside their bedroom window. And, they would go out, they would open the door and play with that robin and talk to her. And it was around all the time. It was just there. And in the evenings, they would walk across to our house, to have their milk, evening cup of tea and milk and everything. And we would be playing in the garden, and this little robin would be again flying back there, perched itself either on the basketball ring or on the clothes line or on a tree branch. And it would be still twittering and cheeping around us. And my granddaughters would say, "Look, Nani, there it is, she's our friend." So when I had to write this story, it had to be something different. The pet had to be a bird. It did not have to be a caged bird. It had to be a free bird. And then trees. Trees are very important in my life. I am fascinated by trees. In fact, I think they call out to me, especially the old ones with gnarled trunks. They have such a history, and they are so beautiful. So you can even call me a tree hugger. I literally walk across to trees and hug them whenever I can. So, and looking out of one's window and seeing a tree, flowering or branching towards you, what could be more beautiful than that? So that itself, that has also woven its way into my story. So there are trees, there is a bird, which is a pet, which is not a caged bird. And this is my interpretation of how it came about.
What about you, Richa? What about your story in the book?
So my story is called When Mommy Teaches Her Baby Brother a Lesson, or how she teaches. So it's purely an act of fiction. I mean, for me, there is very little from my own childhood that I remember of. So it's sort of a blank, which is in a way worked for a story like this because I was able to therefore weave many childhoods into this. So some came from how I saw my children growing up. So the older one trying to teach the younger one a lesson. Siblings, that sort of dynamics came from my son and my daughter, the way I saw them squabbling at times, loving each other at times, and how each would be after the other to sort of, I have to teach you a lesson, so, and all kinds of things that they would do around it. So the kernel of the story sort of came from there. And just like Ratna said, how trees and birds have been so important through her growing up years and through life. I think books played that sort of role for me, for all of us. But that's one part of my childhood that I actually remember. Hugging my book and moving all over the place. In fact, now if I ask my siblings about, and they are younger to me, and I say, what do you remember of my childhood? I mean, when we were growing up, he says, Didi, they say, Didi, all we remember is that, you would be in some corner sitting with a book in your hand, with your nose buried deep inside. So maybe that, that's some little thing that I do remember of my own childhood. So that sort of also wove its way into the story, because the entire way in which the sort of resolution happens to that teaching a lesson sort of thing in the story happens through books, through a book in this. So that was that. Then, my son used to be a thumb sucker when he was very, very young. So some bit of that has filtered into the story. It's little bits taken from everywhere, which I guess would be true for most of the stories which are a part of the book, which Mamta will, of course, say whether her bike riding was the way it is or not. But the fascinating part about this book is that each time we read the story by another author, we find some bits of ourselves in all the stories. And I'm sure we'll talk about it, Mamta, yeah, we will talk about it, I'm sure, which is the most fascinating aspect of a book like this. So it's fiction, and yet, there are so many strands of ourselves and of the world around us that we see that goes into it. Oh, one very important part. For a while, we lived in Bangladesh, and there we had a very colonial sort of thing, and you had these nice, huge wicker baskets and furniture made wicker. So that has also found its way into my story, because for me, I come from Dhanbad, which is like the coal field belt, okay, absolute coal thing. And there, I never knew that wicker baskets could be so fascinating for somebody, even in her third and fourth decade of life. So that fascination also found a way into my story. So it's a little bit of everything, but most essentially about several childhoods. Mamta, yes, you tell me. You tell us.
Okay, so the story that I have in the book is basically a story of how my grandmother, my nani, taught my mother how to ride a bicycle. So that's the story. As a child, for me, like every summer vacation meant a long, long retreat to my grandparents' place in Gandhidham, in Kutch, which is like a small little town which was originally built for the resettlement of Sindhi refugees after partition. So every year during summers when we used to go to Gandhidham, we would go to our grandparents' place. We would always find Nani standing at the gate waiting for us, and many things come to my mind when I think of my Nani. She was a staunch Gandhian, so she used to wear those like crisp suti saris. She was a teacher. She always used to carry a nail cutter in her bag to clip off the nails of the students who like to grow them long. Her mealtime anecdotes of partition, of how onions used to taste much sweeter there. So all those anecdotes I remember, but most of all I remember her royal ride, her bicycle. So she bought a bicycle, a second-hand bicycle from the first salary that she got as a teacher. And she had 6 children and no help at hand. So she had very little time in the mornings. So she would usually ride on her bicycle to school. And she would take off on her bicycle just like that, like just to get some fresh air or to run errands. So I felt that maybe that was her first taste of freedom, mobility, independence, and that's what she tried to cultivate in her children as well. So when I read about the anthology and I thought of contributing a story to this anthology, this story that had been sitting in my mind for quite some time kind of raised its head, and I thought of writing it down. So that's basically my story in the book. And like I said, like Richa was talking about her story, so I think what is fascinating about this anthology is that apart from, like when I was reading all these stories in the book, like I felt all the little mommies are so diverse. Not just in terms of the contexts and geographies, but also in the way they sort of challenge stereotypes. So for example, Richa's story. So it's a story about little mommy trying to lock her brother in the bathroom and then getting scared and worried. What if like the brother kind of she's down the pot. So I think that's like, you don't see mothers like that, no? Like you see them as first of all, their sacrifice, their selfless love. So here's this little mommy who's kind of locking her brother into the bathroom. So what are your views on that? Do you think? And there's another story, very interesting story in the book, which is about little mommy trying to steal something from a friend. So stealing is such a natural instinct for a child. It's a development stage, right? Because of the lack of impulse, they try and steal. But we never mommies are. They need to have a very clear sort of moral compass. So I think in that way, like there are a lot of stories in the book that kind of challenge the stereotypical imagery that is associated with mothers. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, that's what you were. This stereotypical bit about a mother, we tend to take our mothers for granted. Me, for example, I don't feel shy in saying that I definitely took my mother for granted for the longest time. And it's only when you become a mother yourself, you realize what your mother is all about. And that happened to me. And as I mentioned earlier in my story, I am an only child. My mother was widowed very early on in life. So I was brought up by my maternal grandfather and my mother. And I have only seen my mother working. And, she used to drive the Vespa scooter. In fact, Dehradun, she's known for that, like the only lady with a Vespa scooter with a little girl sitting behind her, which was me. And in her crisp starch sarees, go to work, come back, work at home, and then again go back to work with never any, Hindi में क्या बोलते हैं, शिकंज, कुछ, that she never complained, never cribbed, and she just set about her, work, whatever she had to do, she did it with such grace and quiet dignity. And it's much later on in life, I didn't even know that, she had a life as a little girl. I only saw her as mummy, this is what mummies look like. And it was much later, maybe in middle school, when I was going through the albums and I could connect. And I saw pictures of her doing the high jump and playing netball in shorts. And I didn't know it was my own mother, and I'd say, "Kaun hai?" And she'd say, "It's me." And I couldn't, for the life of me, imagine that my mother had such a life. She used the word feisty. I think that's what my mother was. She was very feisty. She used to play sport. Till today, she tells me, "Look at your spindly legs and look at mine. My calves are so nice and solid." I'm a sporting, I used to play sport. And I haven't played sport. I am only a bookworm. So, and then she used to play the sitar for All India Radio. When I grew up, in all my growing up years, I only saw her working. She never played the sitar. Yes, the sitar was lying there, but it had been shifted to the storeroom later on. And much, much later, when I got married, and I visited my maternal uncle, and of course, by then I knew that she used to sing, but again, I never heard her sing. And he made me listen to, he had those spools, those tapes, those round ones. And he made me listen to those songs after we got married, and I was sitting there in his room, and what beautiful music. So she did all that, which was, sidelined for the longest time. And so this is part of our mothers, which really we don't know. What about you, Richa?
Yeah, so I'll answer this in two parts. One is what Mamta was asking, and how she started off saying. We are all glad that stories like these are a part of an anthology that's accessible to children, written in a very, very easy sort of fashion, which, a child across any reading capability can pick up and enjoy. So these are not, these are very simply told stories that anybody can connect with. And why it's important to have a book like this is because, therefore, as Mamta said, there are so many aspects of our mothers that, of motherhood that usually doesn't get talked about in books, because we always see the sacrificing mother, or the, what are the other adjectives that could come to our mind? But usually the moral compass is of a very, very high order. Right? So when we do have stories where mothers are naughty, mothers are willing to tell all kinds of lies, mothers are willing to do all kinds of things which are typically not motherly things, children get exposed to realities very different from what the overall, the canonical literature canon can sort of usually give to them. And this hopefully will help them go back to their own parents, revisiting their own parents the way they see them versus what could more be discovered in their parents' lives or from their parents' lives. So a book like this could very well sort of encourage a child to go to the mother or to the father and say, "Batao, bachpan mein kya kya masti ki aapne?" So it's just that little window that gets opened between that child and the parent to talk about many aspects that may have got left unexplored otherwise. So it's important to see, and we are all humans. I mean, it's important for everybody to understand that regardless of our role that we play in our lives, be it the mother, the grandmother, we all are human at the end of the day. And these are all very, very human qualities, which are qualities or both positive and negative, which have come out in a book like this. They're all very endearing. A child stealing, for instance, is it's done in a very, very loving sort of manner. A child going and locking up her brother in the bathroom is again done in a very, very endearing, loving sort of a manner. So these are stories which need to be told because it helps children take so much more out of the lives of their or the realities of their parents that they may not be exposed to as yet. So that's one. And second, taking on from what Ratna was saying, of course, I mean, there are so many aspects of our own mothers, my own mother that I have started knowing only now. Because, when I was growing up, I hardly had the time to talk to her. She was busy, I was busy. And who talks to mothers when you're like a teenager? Hello, you don't do that, right? Then there's a stage when you positively don't want to have anything to do with your parents. I mean, there'll be the door banging stage and stuff like that, where you walk out when the mother says anything, and it's the bang opposite of what your mother says is what you end up doing. And then the moment that stage gets over, you're out of the house and you're out in college. And again, there's hardly any, at that time, you had those STD calls, which was still 1/4 rate after 10 o'clock or 10:30. So that calls, and we had these huge lines right behind us of all the students, all the residents waiting. 2 minutes of talk and jaldi karo, khatam karna hai. So we hardly had any conversations with my mother as such. Then marriage happened, children happened. So, finally, I'm getting to discover my mother only now in the real sense. Because now almost every day, morning walk, I'm out and I'm calling up my mother, "Mom, what's happening?" So it's that, I don't know, in some way, Mamta has a very beautiful sentence in her book that has won the award this time. It's called I and I. And very beautifully, she's dedicated to her mother, auntie sitting right here. And she says, to Ma, I'm stealthily growing into you, right? I found it, I thought it's the most beautiful 3 or 4 lines I've read about a tribute to the mother. I'm stealthily growing into you.
But they say that, no? That
yes.
You turn into your mother.
You turn into your mother,
The
and
time
I'm
comes
feeling
when you
that
turn
now when I'm like, almost 50 and my mother is almost 70, and I see, oh wow, is this, if I'm like this, I know where I'm getting this from. Yeah. I never thought of it, I never saw it. All my life I said, oh, I'm a daddy's girl, and gloated about it. And then suddenly you realize, no, you're actually your mother's girl. And it takes time, it takes years to get to that stage, because the mother-daughter bond, sort of, I think it blooms.
Builds up
yeah,
much
it builds
later,
up. That blossoming happens later on in life, which is when we are able to identify as women, we are able to identify and see our mothers as, as equals and not as being someone. And the mothers then also start seeing us. So I think it's a beautiful way for me of discovering so many things about my mother now. And I think maybe the book may have had something to do with it, for all I know. Yes?
Mamta, about the myth of motherhood, I want you to say something.
So I think there are moments in life when you realize that you've not been seeing your mother at all. So I think when I was a teenager, I again, like you said, I saw a black and white photograph of my mother, and she was wearing a tight pencil skirt, and her hip to waist ratio was just perfect. She was holding, her slender fingers were holding a bottle of Gold Spot. Her head was tilted. She was looking into the camera, and she was very aware of who she was. And that's when I realized that I've never seen her. Man, she's hot. And that was a realization then. So I think that happens to all of us, and it's sort of beautiful.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I mean, the fact that, oh, Mom, you were hot is something that came to me only 2 years ago when I was going through the albums. And with so much pride, I actually posted them all on Facebook on Mother's Day this time. I had never thought I would do anything like that ever in my life. But this time I just felt like doing it because I said, world, look at my mother. This is how absolutely fascinating and beautiful and gorgeous and confident and wonderful she was, when I wasn't there to see her. And, in a way, that was my tribute to my mother. And yes, it's the same thing. Yeah.
So what are the other stories in the book that you sort of relate to?
Relate to.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the first one that I could relate to was when mommy learned to ride a bicycle. Not because you're sitting here, but definitely not because of that, but because, as I mentioned, my grandfather, he bought me a cycle, and green Atlas bicycle. And Dehradun, again, at that point of time, was also, another integral part of Dehradun was the Bajri. We are very proud of the Bajri that we have in our houses and in our driveways. And I had learned, in my case, my Nana used to run behind me to teach me how to ride the bicycle. And one of these days, I was racing with a friend of mine. And those days, those maxis were the rage. You know those A-line tight maxis? And yours truly wore that and went cycling. And obviously fell headlong into the Bajri. And that was the end of my cycling episodes. And the second one I could relate to was how mommy treated her doll. Because dolls and I don't think I still have grown up. I'm still a little girl at heart, age notwithstanding. And there was a very interesting incident, when we were posted in Zakama. I don't know how many of you have even heard of the place. It's in Nagaland, close to Kohima. And we used to go from Zakama to Kohima just to buy dolls for my daughter. And my husband would tell me, I don't think she needs them as much as you do, because the Barbies had just come in. And I said, no, she has to have a drawing room set. She has to have a bedroom set. So I could relate to that. As a little girl, I had a walkie-talkie doll, a 3 feet high walkie-talkie doll, which was beautiful. That's what the photographs tell me. But I don't know, at some point of time, I damaged it beyond control. So that's how I could relate, I chopped off her hair, the eyes, chopped off the eyelashes. So the poor doll was quite ugly by the time I was done with it. And the third story I could relate to was how mommy saw a ghost. I mean, there are children sitting here. I keep telling all the children I talk to, there's no such thing as ghosts. But heart of hearts, I'm scared. All said and done. When mommy saw a ghost, I don't like seeing supernatural movies. So these are the 3 stories I could relate to. Mamta, what about you?
I think there's a story which has been written by Nandini Nair, which is about little mommy. She has short hair and she is participating in a dance performance, and all the other girls have long hair, and she also wants to have long hair. So she wears a fake plait, and during the dance recital, she sort of loses it. So I also had short hair, and even now I have short hair. So I can actually relate to that story. What about you, Richa?
So I'm going through all the stories now. So pretty much, when I read Cheryl's story, which is the first story about the doll, I couldn't stop chuckling because, A, of the way it's been written, but also because it's just so relatable. All of us have had experiences like that with the doll. And like Ratna was saying, she's not sure if she's the one who's more fascinated by dolls or her daughter. It's the same case with me. Even now, anywhere I travel, even this time, to the hotel, I have this little soft toy that's traveling with me. Imagine. It's Pandu. Okay, it's a panda, little tiny panda, and it's called Pandu, and it's come with me this time. And similarly, no matter where I go, there's something that travels with me always. The form of the doll has changed. So earlier we had those plastic dolls with movable eyelids, and where, like in the story, you could insert whatever. You could squeeze a bottle inside and all that. Now, of course, we have such fancy plush toys, these beautiful stuffed ones. So I have sort of taken to those now, both my daughter and I. And yesterday I was in Mussoorie. And my daughter is now almost 18. And again, we share our fascination for dolls of all kinds. And even yesterday I picked up a doll for her. Imagine. So, that's the kind of, I don't think, and my daughter's biggest worry now is that she'll be very soon off to college. And just last week she was saying, Mom, my biggest worry is what, I said, what? She says, Mom, I will not be able to decide which one to take and which not to take with me when I go to the hostel. So that's the extent, because she thinks all of those dolls are her babies. And by extension, because I see her connect so well with those things, we have our conversations around those dolls and those babies and all that. So that doll one is very special.
Very special. I think
Mamta's again, because oh gosh, the number of times I have fallen off the bike while trying to learn. My father was the one trying to teach me, and I still have scars all over. I mean, if you could see closely, my entire elbow is full of scars. And all because each time I would go, I would fall off the bicycle. So very, very relatable and lovely story. The other one that I enjoyed, and I could relate with a lot, was Aarti's story, climbing the guava tree. I still can't climb a tree. I mean, there's something about it. I go a little distance up and then I start feeling very, I freak out. And the child in this story has a similar thing. She says, okay, she puts it all onto the vertigo, but as her cousin sort of encourages her and gets her to climb higher and higher, and then there she goes and she gets over her fear. I wish, when I was reading the story, I wish I had a cousin like this girl has in this story. To push me further up, jao, kuch nahi hoga. Because I'm still, even now we see very, very few children climbing trees. But for me, the thought of being able to climb is a very liberating one. And I hope that, before I die, maybe at some stage, I do get over that fear. And I'm actually able to climb onto some higher branches and sit there perched. I mean, my dream is to sit there perched with a book in my hand, yes.
Read a book.
So, and I really hope that it comes true, which is why that story was also very, very special for me. Yeah.
Okay, so what books did you grew up reading? And do you see, like, since we're talking about this book, do you see a big difference in the kind of books that you read as a child and the books that are being made now?
I think not just because of the fact that we are sitting here, also because all three of us are so connected with the world of children's literature now. There's a huge difference in the way books, in the kind of books that were available to us then and now. And I guess it would be uniform for all of us. We would have grown up all reading the same books. It was Enid Blyton, the entire series. All of the entire series was something that all of us grew up with and on. As we grew up, it was Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. And the usual, I mean, we didn't have a choice, did we? We just didn't have any sort of choice beyond these. The moment you got into your 7th or whatever, then suddenly you felt, oh, I'm Cat's Whiskers, and now I can go on to Agatha Christie, or maybe in grade 6. And then you go on to Sidney Sheldon, and you feel, you come across one any word that you don't know, and you go and look up the dictionary and say, oh, this is a dirty word, So that's how we all grew up reading the same books, the same experiences, reading and all that. Now it's so different for the children because of the sheer range of books that's available. We didn't have exposure to Indian literature in English, at least at that time. We did have, thanks to some very, very good books in Hindi that we have had as part of our curriculum. Hindi I mean, we read, I think, Premchand extensively, right? All of us did. And also so many others. But all that was Hindi, yes. Important, very, very important. We are grateful for that. But English, Indian literature in English is not something that we were exposed to at all, because we didn't have anything at that time. Not even as translations. So I think for our children, that's a huge change that has happened. And why it's also important for them is because they then get to see themselves in all the stories, rather than us growing up thinking about George and who were all these characters, in some old, godforsaken island somewhere, and ships and lighthouses and all that none of us knew, but we could only imagine. Now you have children who are looking at, who are talking about autos, which is discolored, and they're talking about potholes, and they're talking about a cow sitting in the middle of the road. And all that is so very identifiable and relatable to the children. So they see themselves in the books, and they see their own childhoods in the books that they're exposed to now, which is very, very important. And at the same time, they get books from the international market as well. So they are sort of getting the best of both worlds. So their exposure, therefore, is truly of a very, very different and high order in that sense.
So for me, Me, same thing, what you said.
I think it would be
Enid
the same.
Blyton,
Same,
and of
same,
course,
yeah.
side by side, the comics were playing a very important part in our lives. Archie Comics, Little Dot, Lotta, Dennis the Menace.
Yeah, but also Pran, Pinky and Chacha Chaudhary.
Not
Yeah.
for me so
Okay,
much.
for me.
So that played a very important role side by side. And as I said, books were my window to the world. So I mean, I wouldn't even go home if I didn't have a book to read. I would devour a book a day. And oh, we have 5 minutes left. Oops, we wanted to open it to the
Oh
audience.
gosh, we've been talking that much.
Should we open it to the
Yeah,
audience?
I think
then?
so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
5
Okay,
minutes for the
okay,
discussion.
okay.
Okay, quickly. Well, then, today's world, the children, the mindset has changed, and so have the stories. I mean, our children do not believe in fairies and fairy dust anymore. So it's all about very, very different. That I don't think even English has, creeped into the words, which is good. And why even English? It's even the vernacular. Vernacular words are creeping into our books, which is very, very nice. It's a welcome change. The picture books, what are they called? No. Graphic novels. Graphic novels are making big inroads now into our books because the reason being that some child who does not want to read, drab black and white pages and the monotonous, thick, heavy book may just pick up a picture book, a graphic novel. It may spike his interest when he sees pictures. And he may just read. So the idea is get the child to read either which way. So, Mamta, over to you.
Yeah, I think publishers have become more brave. Like they're experimenting in a lot of formats and themes, and I think some of the themes that are being handled in children's literature with such nuance and sensitivity, I think they might seem unwieldy even for an adult audience. So I think children's publishers are doing a great job, and I also feel that this is basically about the English publishing for children. I'm sure there is a lot happening in the Bhasha languages as well, but I think there has to be some sort of a reasonable communication between languages for us to know what is happening in the other languages. So I think translation takes a major role there. So I think a lot more translations need to happen because I think a major chunk of the writers and books and ideas that have kind of stuck with me have come from translation. So and there are of course publishers like Pratham, Tulika and Katha and Parag. They're doing a lot in translations, but I think that there is scope for more. So I think all these things are happening, and I feel there is a lot of hope for children's publishing.
Also
in
in the way history is being presented to children,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Earlier
yes.
we had access only to Amar Chitra Katha. Either that or some very, very drab books
Yes.
which no child would ever
Pick up.
on his or her own. But now history is being presented in such a brilliant, interesting manner that's fun, engaging, and children actually do want to know more about it, therefore. So-
One quick question before we open up the floor to the audience. Your biggest takeaway from this anthology?
Okay, I think to be alongside like such wonderful writers, I think is something that I'm going to delight in for a long time. So yes, that's
Richa, what about
Yeah, the same, I think, It's just so many aspects of motherhood coming out in a book like this. I think that's the most wonderful part about a book like
I just felt that after reading all the stories, I was just thinking, what exactly have I got out of it? The main thing is that no matter in all the stories, whether it's the mommy who got a pet who was not actually living with her in the house, or the little mommy who got up, fell down, got up, dusted her clothes, moved on, is that no matter what happens in life, no matter how many hurdles you have to cross, you just get up, dust yourself, and move on. Like in that famous Bob Marley song, every little thing's gonna be all right. So at the end of it, I think all the 15 stories, they were woven together under the same theme that everything is going to be all right and life is meant for living. And also 15 of us got together, like-minded mommies, to create this wonderful little book called When Mommy Was a Little Girl. I'd like to open up the floor to the audience. If anybody would like to either ask a question to one of the authors, or you would like to give us some persona of your mother or yourself as a mother, Has motherhood changed you in any way, or would you like to talk about your mother's persona? Which, yes, ma'am.
I'm all right and loud enough. My husband says the neighbors can hear me.
I think that's with all of us.
Hi, you guys are wonderful, fantastic. It was such a pleasure hearing all three of you. And I can't wait to read the book. I haven't read the book, but what I could make out, it sounds wonderful, very uplifting and very positive and positive stories and everything. Hello, yeah. But I was kind of wondering, would you ever want to put together a book where you have stories which children can relate to nowadays? You know, there are a lot of not very positive things happening, okay, especially with the parents. So, like, sometimes, you know, you have single mothers or you have parents who are going through, difficult times or separations or different personalities or, stepmoms and stepfathers and different set of parents and everything, bullying in the school, so many aspirations and everything. And as you said, every little thing is going to be all right. So something that the children can read and say, hey, you know what, other people also go through all this and everything will be all right because it happened to this child in the book and, parents went through it and it's perfectly fine. It's not my parents' fault or my mom's or my dad's or something of that kind.
So, a lot of stories are being written. In fact, I don't think due to paucity of time we couldn't discuss that point. But a lot of stories are being written on the new, the new happenings like same-sex relations also and parents not living together.
Such a difficult time for the children to
in fact,
grow up nowadays.
Tomorrow we'll be discussing in the morning our session on I&I, which Mamta has written, is also a little bit, I don't want to give away too much, but is also a little bit on that. It's a little picture book, but again, the child has to deal with a difficult situation, which is, am I right? Yeah. So we'll be discussing that tomorrow. So books are being made on that. Richa would be telling you more.
Because as a publisher, I can say that, the kind of experimentation and the kind of, I think, boldness with which we publishers are approaching children's literature in India, it's not happening anywhere else in the world. I think, difficult subjects are being taken up everywhere, especially in the US and all that, but even there are so many themes, so to speak, difficult subjects that we are able to do with such ease in India, and I'll come to the ease bit later, that than any other market in the world. And I am exposed to sort of pretty much every single publishing sort of ecosystem that's out there. There'll be certain, so they'll be brave, yes, to an extent, but in India there is absolutely nothing that we cannot now discuss in a picture book, in a children's book.
The Little Miss Goody Two Shoes kind of books now are definitely changing.
So
they're not there. Enid Blyton kinds, they're not there anymore.
So, and the heartening thing is that children are reading those books. And they're discussing about those books. So even though, the schools are sort of late in adopting those things. It's the children who are doing it first. And then they are going back to the school saying, okay, here, school, this is a book that we would like to have in our library. So I think we are pretty much sorted in that sense. And our children are very much sorted in as far as taking up difficult issues is concerned, accepting things.
Change.
I think the biggest problem still is the parents. They are the hardest, strictest gatekeepers, and they don't want their children reading anything, but the children are absolutely devouring everything that is out there too.
Like last year, there was a book, it came in Valley of Words also, I think, Vibha Batra's, what was the name of the book? That big yellow picture book.
But
she covered all... she covered all the topics. She covered same-sex relations. She covered divorce. She covered something else.
Charles' book, I think, Prisha and
their same-sex
so
parents.
Books for the young adults, especially, are changing now. Definitely.
Everything is being now talked about. You have difficult marriages. You have marital abuse. Even these kind of subjects, domestic abuse, even these kind of subjects are now coming into books as, elementary as picture books. And picture books are meant for children, what, from the age of 2 to say
Yeah,
5, right? So these subjects are dealt with even in those
In fact,
books.
my story, which has just been published by Children's Book Trust, called 12 Online Stories and More. In my story, I've dealt with a broken marriage, where the girl is in the boarding school and sometimes the father comes to pick her up and sometimes the mother comes to pick her up. And how traumatic it is for her every time to guess, okay, who's coming this time? So things are changing. Yes, Bijoya.
Ratna, this is very interesting, but I feel that we shouldn't stop writing beautiful books. Because you know, the way we used to escape into the world of Enid Blyton feels so good. I think we should write both.
I agree with you.
You know, we
totally.
shouldn't stop that, you know, child experiencing that magical world where everything's perfect.
Yes.
And maybe they can try to work towards that perfection.
Imagination, you know.
Imagination,
We shouldn't
you know.
kill their
It's-
imagination.
it's-
I
yeah,
agree with
and
you.
it's
That
very
is
therapeutic.
happening.
It's very therapeutic.
therapeutic.
And maybe that could be the ideal world they can work towards. Why should they be forced?
Fully agree
We
with
are
you.
going through hell, of course,
Yes.
but they don't have to live
So
in
why
that
not
hell all the
escape
time.
with the books
Yeah,
into
through
a
the
good,
books,
better world?
like we enjoyed them. You
So,
know?
so those books are also available.
Yes,
ma'am.
yes.
They are
I
think
still.
there's
I mean,
space for everything,
There's space for
every kind
everything.
of
Yeah,
story.
I think both books are important,
Yes.
both kinds of books.
Well
Yes.
said.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing it up. Yes.
Neha.
Hello everyone. So coming back to the point that we should, discuss all these topics with our kids. Just wanted to know whether kids are really ready to, read those books about the cancer and all. About the cancer and all, because I'm being a very protective mother. Yeah, so I just keep these sort of books away from my kids that they should not read. So how to deal with that?
And then I'll take it. You take that first.
Okay, I think children perceive much more than what we give them credit for. I think they're experiencing a lot of things. They're seeing, feeling, experiencing the same world as we are. So our job is not really to protect them from hurt and heartache, because that's going to happen. Our job is to be there with them. You know, yesterday I read this very beautiful thing on Instagram. Let children go through everything. Be near. So I think that's the crux of the whole thing. Like, you can't protect them from everything, but you can help them make sense of their feelings and emotions. So I think that is something that maybe we can all do, and can offer a perspective, maybe. Yeah.
So I'll just add something to that from my own experience as a parent. I've been reading picture books to my children ever since they were very, very young. So my son was just 4 months old when I started reading out to him. And my daughter, while she was still inside me, because, I was reading out to my son, so she happened to. And I must tell you that, there were all kinds of books that I was reading out to him. Again, all the kind of things that I talked about. And in all those moments, when there was a book which was serious, which was, at one point I would choke while reading it, because, there is only that much you can take as a reader. And especially when you're reading out and aloud, your voice sort of just at times gives away, because you know that you can't hold the emotions any longer, and then you start your voice starts shaking. And my son at that time, and later my daughter, they would just move closer to me. And we were with the picture book together, right? So they were following the illustrations very well. They were listening to my words. And at that point, they would just stop. They would look at me, and they would just hug me. And I remember my son telling me, "Mom, it's okay. These things happen." My child was like barely 4 years old at that time. Right? So, and these were what books about. I'll give you a couple of examples. One is where the mother has died in the book. All right? And the child is having to deal with that loss, huge loss. And I couldn't, after a while, I couldn't go on reading the book, because I had to sort of just pause for a while to take in everything. And my son just said, "Mom, it's okay, it happens." And that's what told me it's fine. Children understand everything.
Right.
And the more we sensitize them to these things in a safe environment, the more they pick it up from our company, the better equipped they are to handle a lot of nonsense that they're going to be getting from outside world.
the outside.
In that sense, they'll be able to turn around and say, "Hello, what you are telling me may not be the only version, or may not be the best version of what you know. I also know something." And I feel that we are just empowering our children much better by discussing these things with them. So if it's a particularly different, so for instance, you mentioned cancer. When you sit with your child, let her start asking questions. Why is this happening? What is happening? Or you could ask them questions. What do you think is happening? And it's a beautiful conversation starter. I always say these difficult books make even stronger conversations between you and your child.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have time for one more? No, I think we are done. Yes, please.
We grew up in a family where we all love reading. And I always buy books for my grandkids, and my daughter loves to write. But I think this is great because growing up there, and my daughter did get married to an Indian, boy. So growing up, I think it's going to be great for me to take some books back for them, or if they're available, and I'm sure you can find them on Amazon. I'm pretty sure everything's available. But that would be great, and I think it's great because I can take back a little bit of India for them because they love reading, or like I read stories to my 2.5-year-old, and she told me, I told her I'm going to India. She's like, can you get me some bindis? Like, so she's like this little girl, but she loves stories, and I would love to. I think it's great because growing up we didn't have these kind of books to read. So it's amazing that there's so much of this now being written in India, and I really look forward to more and more of it. The one small question I had was, so what is this age group, like this book? I mean, can it be read to younger kids, or it's more like 8 to 12-year-olds?
8 to 10, I think.
Yeah,
But I
that's
think
what I
even
mean.
younger
7 to
children
10.
would be
Yeah,
fine
you can
because the
read it
mommies
out.
in this book are very young.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
read
They
it
are
out
all
to them.
from age, I think, 3, 4 or something to
Yeah.
If
a
they
slightly-
have to read it themselves, then
No, they
probably
won't be
7.
reading
If
it,
you
like-
read it,
Yeah,
absolutely, it's very simple language.
Yeah, but I think it's really amazing that this is all happening here. So thank you for all of writing all this stuff. That's
Thank
And
you,
just to let you
thank
know,
you.
ma'am, there's a stand here.
Yeah.
The moment you enter, there's a IPDA stand which has all the Tulika books. So you'll find some fabulous
yeah.
picture books
I'll
that you would
definitely
get.
pick some up.
And if you move a little further up, it's a shameless plug for Pickle you'll find some lovely books there as well.
absolutely. Thank you. Thanks.
So I'll just end. I think I've been told that we have to end the session. In the words, let's just end on a happy note, even though we are discussing books, which are a little this thing for the children. In the words of the trolls, as the trolls said, life is full of cupcakes and rainbows. So let's just keep looking at the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and keep writing. And thank you so much. You've been so wonderful. Thank you for coming.
It was really very engaging discussion, and I'm really grateful to the panelists in the chair especially for keeping the session very interactive and interesting. So now I would like to request Mr. Nirmal Kanti Bhattacharya, Director, Niyogi Books and Sahitya Academy Project Fellow, to please present a book token of thanks to our chair, Ms. Mamta Neni. Ladies and gentlemen, please have a big round of applause for Mamta Neni. Yes, please.
All the three authors here who happen to be women, but also happen to be one-time girls. Suppose a publisher, maybe the same publisher, asks you to curate another book, going back to the Alexander's title when daddy was a little boy. Will you write it with the same gusto as you wrote about your mother? You think so? Good. Good. Thank you.
Now I would like to request Ms. Mamta Neni to present a token of thanks to our two wonderful authors, Richa Jha and Ratna Manucha. A big round of applause, everyone. Now, to Ms. Richa Jha. With this applaud, we conclude the session here, and the next session will begin sharp at 4:15. So be here with us. Thank you.